Going on, some surprises this evening and some races that are still being contested at this very hour. We're keeping a close eye on the congressional district races in the 1st and the 2nd congressional district. Very tight right now.
Yeah, we want to take a look at some of the numbers at the 2nd congressional district there, with 88% of the precincts reporting in. Angie Craig is ahead at 52%, Democrat Angie Craig over incumbent Jason Lewis, and she actually is talking right now at the podium, so let's listen to her.
Yeah, she's in Egan. Our Bill Hudson is there as well.
It's been about jobs and job skills for every person in this country. It's been about taking dark, anonymous money out of our politics in this country. And it's been about listening and showing up.
That's right.
And it's about decency and civility.
That's right.
And it's about working together to try to find common ground and actually govern in this country
That's
again.
Right.
What a moment this is. None of it would have been possible, though, without the love and support of my family.
Yeah.
Cheryl Green, thank you for encouraging me to do this again and for being with me every single step of the way.
Well, Pat, that sounds like a victory speech.
Yeah, and she talked about civility and working together, which seems to be a theme tonight.
Yeah, Democrats around the state were using that. Angie Craig, it's a campaign again, their second time she's running against Jason Lewis. Jason Lewis wins the first time. If this holds up, and it's not official yet, but if it holds up, that's another incumbent Republican congressman who is knocked off. And so that is a big deal. And if that is exactly what happens, that means, again, there are more voters coming out in the 2nd district, so we have to look at some of the down-ballot races and how that'll affect them.
And well, that speaks to the bigger picture that the Republicans are going to keep the Senate, but they're going to do well in the House, and it's because of some of these Minnesota races.
Yeah, and we don't know what the net pickup will be. Right now, there's a Republican who won in a Democratic district, so Republican district flips to Democrat, and a Democrat district flips to Republican. So right now, Angie Craig is going to be the one that actually would be a +1 for Democrats here in Minnesota.
Well, we had 4 races here, though, in Minnesota that nationally they were looking at.
Right, and that is the 8th district with Stauber, and it looks like he is going to pull that out and win that. So
yeah, well, CBS declares him the winner.
Yeah, so that is a win for the Republicans, flipping it from Democrat to Republican. And then in the 3rd congressional district, you've got Dean Phillips, a Democrat, flipping it from Republican to Democrat. So
yeah,
that's a wash right there.
And apparently Angie Craig taking
that would be a
from,
+1. So yeah, it's very interesting.
We're hearing that CBS just called Angie Craig.
All right, so I'm looking at these numbers. It looks like it's going to be 52% to about 47% for Angie Craig, 48% for Jason Lewis. So that is a big one. That is a +1 for the Democrats, who we believe are already going to control the U.S. Congress. The Democrats are now in control of Congress with all of this.
So right now, if you were going to look at the state of Minnesota and all this, like this historic early voting that came out for this midterm election.
It's been amazing. It's been amazing.
Seems to benefit the Democrats at this point.
At this point, that's exactly what it looks like. We will have a breakdown of where all of these are, but 634,000 early voters. And it looks like many of them were motivated to come out and vote. And we have a much higher voter turnout. We don't know the exact numbers yet than we have had in years here in Minnesota. All of that, the get out the vote by the Democrats, has enhanced their ability to win tonight.
All right, thanks. Let's get out to hear one of the candidates now, Peggy Flanagan. And also, we want to run through, stay with us, we'll go through all the digital races as well, because there's a lot of things going on in Wisconsin we want to get you updated on as well.
Now, we know what one Minnesota means. It means a state where you can be that kid with a different colored lunch ticket who grows up to become lieutenant governor. One Minnesota means working together across lines of difference to ensure that everyone has an opportunity in this state. And we begin that work tomorrow. Yeah. But tonight we're going to celebrate a little bit. My favorite job on the campaign has been to introduce the man who will lead this work. My partner in justice, not in crime. That's right. My partner in justice. My partner in justice and I have been on this journey for almost 13 months. We've been friends for over a decade. We've traveled together, met a few thousand Minnesotans, and we've heard their stories. I am pleased to be his lieutenant governor. But more importantly, I am grateful to be his friend. So,
I'm hugging on that.
So with that, and this is the coolest part of my entire gig, I get to introduce you, ladies and gentlemen, Minnesotans, the governor-elect, Tim Walz.
Wow. Well, wow, 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 wow. Hello, one Minnesota. Yay. Our democracy is strong tonight. The incredible work and sacrifice that went in to win a campaign is incredible. To my family, I don't know how I can to the person who makes this all happen, your next First Lady of Minnesota, Gwen Walz. And to my two great kids, Hope and Gus, I love you dearly. Yeah, a 12-year-old, this should be interesting. To my incredible extended family, to include my father-in-law, Val Whipple, and my mother-in-law, Lynn Whipple, thank you for all you do. To the amazing campaign staff, there will be a time to thank them all, but I have never seen, I have never seen a more dedicated group of people. Carrie Lucking and the rest, thank you. And to each and every one of you, the incredible volunteers, I need to take a time for someone, and we know what builds the middle class. This great city, this great state, and this great nation was built, and it was built by labor. To my sisters and brothers in labor, thank you. To all of you who worked on this campaign, door knocked, did everything we asked of you, think about what you did. You turned out in this state historic numbers of voters. To our DFL party chairman, Ken Martin, and his staff, thank you, thank you, thank you. See, Ken, it's not a thankless job, so. And I, like Peggy, would like to take a moment to thank our opponents, Jeff Johnson and Donna Bergstrom. Thank them for running a campaign based on the issues of dignity, Thank them for running a campaign that tried to lift up our politics rather than dragging it down. And I want to be very clear. Jeff Johnson loves this state dearly, and if campaigns are done right, it is simply putting out different visions. We in Minnesota know we can bridge those gaps to create one Minnesota. So thank you. To our leader, who we get the privilege, and I will be able to succeed, our Governor, Mark Dayton. We owe Mark Dayton a deep debt of gratitude. He left this state with fiscal stability, with investments in the priority of our people, and put the building blocks for a better future in place. Thank you, Governor Dayton.
That's some breaking news.
That's all private. That's private.
There's your next governor, Tim Walz. Pat's here with some breaking news. This is interesting, Pat.
Yeah, it looks like the Minnesota House will now be controlled by the DFL. So DFL takes control of the Minnesota House because of the surge in voting, the Democrats voting. We're seeing it up and down the line, up and down the ballot for Congress, Angie Craig, for Congress, Dean Phillips in the 3rd district. So in the Twin Cities, there is a surge of votes, and it looks like some of these suburban legislators have been voted out. Some of the suburban Republican legislators voted out. So this is going to be very interesting for the next few years if you have a Democrat, Tim Walz, in control and the DFL House. And now we have a Republican-controlled Senate, but with one seat. It's tied 33-33, and there is one special election in central Minnesota that will determine the cause of whether it's going to be actually a Democrat or a Republican controlled. Here is that District 13 seat right now. 58% for Jeff Howe, 42% for Joe Perske, the Democrat. So that is 68%. So that is a pretty big lead for Jeff Howe right now. But the way it's going in the rest of the votes, we're going to have to see where that happens. But it looks like, based on those numbers, and that's not an insurmountable lead, but that's a big lead. It looks like the Republicans will retain control of the state Senate. So that's where we are. It could be a Republican Senate, a Democratic, a DFL House, and a Democratic governor. So that will mix it up like we haven't seen in a while.
No kidding.
It's been gridlock in Minnesota for the last few years.
And it looks like it might continue a little bit. So the next two big things that we're waiting for is results from the 1st congressional district, which is Rochester in southern Minnesota. And then the other thing that we're looking at, and he's one of the few people that have not been caught up in this Democratic wave, is Keith Ellison. We're waiting for results for the Minnesota Attorney General's race.
We want to go to Jennifer Merrily right now. She's going to join us, and she has, I think, maybe an update on that. Jen?
You know, this really has been a race to watch this entire campaign. The polls at some times put Congressman Keith Ellison ahead of the Democratic congressman, and then other at times Republican Doug Wardlow. Tonight, Ellison took an early lead, but not all of the precincts have yet reported. I just heard from Doug Warlow's camp, who they're in the war room watching these results come in, and here's what they said. They said, we're closing the gap, only down 5. That's 5%. Lots of votes left to count. So obviously Wardlow's camp is watching the results come in very closely, very carefully, and they are going to wait to see what the remaining precincts, what the remaining counties, how they vote, and how that could change things throughout the night. Now, this entire race has been extremely controversial, volatile, however you want to put it. It started when Congressman Keith Ellison he had accusations of physical abuse from an ex-girlfriend. He adamantly denied those allegations. You know, he had come from having a congressional seat for a number of years, then coming to run for the Attorney General's office, and during this race had these allegations come up for the first time that we heard about them. His opponent, Doug Warlow, talked about those allegations, saying it made Ellison unfit for the office. Wardlow, of course, known for his work with a conservative group that opposed the expansion of LGBTQ rights. It's been an interesting race to watch again tonight. Both camps still waiting for these results. Ellison just yesterday said that he doesn't really care about the predictions. He's waiting for those final results. And of course, we too, and everyone here at GOP headquarters, still waiting for the final results in this race. We've talked about this before, that a Democrat has held this position of Attorney General in Minnesota since 1970. That means for 48 years, a Democrat has been in control. Now, a Republican is hoping to take the lead, but again, Doug Wardlow still down a few percentage points behind Keith Ellison at this point tonight.
Yeah, and that's their big hope, right, Jen? Because, I mean, you know, they lost a couple Republican incumbent congressmen tonight. They've lost the Minnesota State House, so I'd imagine the people there that are hanging on, I mean, they need a Wardlow victory badly to have something in the Twin Cities at least.
That's right. They're saying, hey, we're not counting us out yet. They're going to keep watching these numbers come in, and they have hope that he could pull off a win tonight, Frank.
Okay, thanks.
Right. Thank you, Jen.
You know, I should clear one thing up, too. Speaking of Republicans in the Twin Cities, Hennepin County Sheriff, I may have misspoke saying that Dave Hutch has defeated incumbent Rich Stanek. We're still waiting for some votes to be counted on that. I mentioned that earlier, and that was premature, so we'll keep an eye on that. But again, Pat, it just speaks to the fact that, especially in the Twin Cities, this high voter turnout is not voting well for the Republican Party.
Yeah, and we've got a lot of these very, very close races, and you're right, Frank, because now they're going to go to every single little ballot, and every vote will be counted, of course, but now every vote matters, as we say, every election. Every vote matters, every vote counts, and in the Hennepin County Sheriff's race, this might be an example of that. We were just talking about the Attorney General's race, guys, and I'm looking at this 50% to 44%. That is getting to be a fairly big lead for Keith Ellison. And over the last week or so, week to 10 days, the Democrats just turned on the steam, turned on the power, and tried to propel Keith Ellison to victory. A lot of money came in from outside Minnesota, and the Minnesota Democratic Party did everything it could to campaign for Keith Ellison, and that's what's happening.
We'd like to talk more about this, but we want to go to Jason Lewis right now, who is at the GOP headquarters.
And I'm proud of that. And boy, did we put a dent in liberalism. Think about it. In 2 short years. Think about it, what we did in 2 short years. The greatest regulatory overhaul in a generation. The greatest tax reform in over 3 decades. And we have set the courts, the judiciary of this country back on the path to constitutional jurisprudence. In 2 years, we did all of that. So this team, all of the people here who worked so hard, we had a great ground game. We hung in there till the end. All of you who did so much, I see so many familiar faces, to help us. Nobody walk away here tonight with your head down. Look, we came up a little short, but the battle endures. And we're not going away. You're not going away. We're going to win this thing. We're going to save this country once and for all, and we're going to hand it off to our kids and be proud of it. So let me just quote Barry Goldwater, who lost a seminal race in 1964 that paved the way for Ronald Reagan and the conservative revolution. And never forget this. I never forgot it, and I always use it. But remember, you and I, we believe in faith, hope, and charity. But none of those is possible without freedom. Thank you all.
One-term Congressman Jason Lewis conceding to Angie Craig tonight in the second. So one house there flips for the Democrats, just like in the 3rd district, with Erik Paulsen being defeated by Dean Phillips this evening.
Yeah, Jason Lewis has been a really interesting congressperson. He has tried very, very hard over the last couple of years that he's been in office to embrace President Trump and the conservative principles of his party, and yet separate himself when he could, including working with Democrats on things like prison reform, on sentencing reform for convicted felons, all of those kinds of things that would appeal to independent and Democratic voters. But it didn't work out that way. This is a district that is changing. It was once a Republican district, then it became kind of a toss-up district. Now clearly it is leaning Democratic, and Angie Craig pulls it off, defeating one-term Congressman Jason Lewis, the former talk show host, very well known in Minnesota.
Yeah.
Well, history was made in Minneapolis tonight. Ilhan Omar is the first Somali American elected to Congress. The Democrat defeated Republican Jennifer Zelensky. WCCO's John Lordson is at the Omar campaign headquarters, or the party earlier in Minneapolis tonight. Hi, John.
Hey, John.
Looks up.
Hi guys, how you doing? Yeah, the party actually just cleared out behind me here at the Courtyard Marriott maybe about a half hour ago, and it was going pretty good there for a while. As you mentioned, Ilhan Omar makes history tonight, becoming the first Somali American elected to Congress and the first refugee elected to Congress. Now, after it was announced that she had won the 5th Congressional District seat previously held by Keith Ellison, a celebration began, and it actually turned into a bit of a dance party here among Omar's friends and supporters. She's actually one of 2 Muslim women elected to Congress now, the other being Rashida Tlaib of Michigan, who won her race as well tonight. Surrounded by her family, Omar thanked those who supported her throughout her campaign, and she promised to fight for women's rights, living wages, health care, and immigration.
This state has always made me feel like I was part of a family. Because here in Minnesota, we don't only welcome immigrants, we send them to Washington.
And this historic race, as you might imagine, received international attention. We had reporters here from France, Japan, Turkey, and England. Some of them are going to spend a couple days here as well, following her now as she celebrates, again, a historic victory, not just for her, but for the DFL as well, guys. So very much a party atmosphere here tonight, is a big victory for Ilhan Omar and the Democrats, guys.
Thanks, John. Yeah, it reminds me a little bit when Keith Ellison was elected, first Muslim American elected to Congress. It was the same kind of fanfare. It was an international story.
Right, and Ilhan Omar, as a refugee from another country, a Somali American, this is a great story. It's a great American story of someone coming here, and now she's actually going to serve in the United States Congress. Pretty interesting.
Speaking of Congress, let's go through congressional races for you, get up to speed. We just found out within the last 5-10 minutes that Angie Craig is in fact going to defeat Jason Lewis. The Democrat will win and beat the incumbent in this race.
In the 3rd Congressional District, or I'm sorry, the 1st Congressional District, with 68% of the precincts reporting. This is the one that we're waiting on. Republican Jim Hagedorn with 50%. It's a tie with Dan Feehan, the Democrat, 50%. So we only have 68% reporting in right now.
And here's the history being made. Significant victory, Omar 78 to 22% over Jennifer Zelensky.
And in the 3rd District, Congressional District, upset, Dean Phillips, the Democrat, unseating Erik Paulsen with 56% of the vote.
Big margin, as Pat was talking about earlier. Pete Stauber is going to beat Joe Radinovich up north. The president and the vice president both campaigned hard for Pete Stauber up in the Duluth area. He's the winner this evening.
And then in the 4th Congressional District, Betty McCollum, the incumbent, with 64% of the vote right now over Greg Ryan.
Tom Member retains his seat in the 6th by an easy margin over Ian Todd this evening. So the 1st is the big one we're waiting for. And then Collin Peterson, no problem, incumbent. Right now with a comfortable lead over Dave Hughes, although we show only 57% reporting there. But if it follows the trend, Pat, I can't imagine we'll see anything too different. But this is the big one that we're following.
Yeah, the 1st district. Yeah, that's the one we're looking for right now. That is very, very close. It's not supposed to be close. Let's talk a little bit about that 1st district, southern Minnesota, including Olmsted County and Rochester. And this is Jim Hagedorn, who the president came to campaign for. He's run 3 previous times, the Republican, son of a former congressman from down there. And Dan Feehan, the Democrat, who is tried to run an upstart young Democratic campaign. But this is farm country down there, and look at this. Here's the governor's race also, which is really interesting to me to see. That's over too.
Yes, and we just heard Tim Walz talking about that. And of course, a special election with Tina Smith, for Al Franken's seat, Senator Al Franken's seat.
Yeah, well, we'll actually drive through them, Pat, and give people a little bit of a recap, and then we can go ahead and take a break because we'll be back on TV a little bit later on to cover some of these as well. So you saw the Walz result. Tim Walz is going to be the next governor of Minnesota. Another couple of big races that we're looking at and things that we're waiting for, primarily the Attorney General race. Keith Ellison and Doug Wardlow in a tight race right now with 70% reporting. This one, though, not close at all. Dean Phillips over Erik Paulsen this evening. He is your new congressman in the 3rd District.
And, of course, we're keeping an eye on the governor's race in Wisconsin, too. And we just talked about this. The Senate race is a special election with Tina Smith retaining her because she's an interim. Governor Dayton appointed her to that. So we'll be keeping an eye on things here at WCCO. Thanks for joining us. You can stay right here online for results throughout the evening. Then we'll be back on TV and online as the results come in. And until then, you can track the races in your community at WCCO.com/results.